Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to day 2 of our live stream week where we're going to be building, we have been, and we're going to continue building a Framer website from start to finish. You're going to learn everything you need to know about building websites in Framer. Yesterday, day 1, we got used to the whole process. We gave an overview and we got set up. This is where we left off. We actually had our Figma file, and you can download this Figma file just by going down to the description of this video here on YouTube and wherever else this is streaming. You can grab that free file on Lemon Squeezy, and when you go ahead and download that for free, you're going to get access to the free Figma design file as well as the completely done Framer template. So if you just want the template, you can go get it for free. If you want to have a before and an after, like the complete version inside of your Framer workspace, and then have a new project as you build along with me, you can totally do that. Or if you want to just take them, download them, throw them away, or sell them to somebody, hey, you can do that too. I don't care. This is all about empowering you and encouraging you and training you to use this amazing technology that we call Framer. So currently I am in Figma right now, and we had a style guide that we built yesterday, which is really step 1, is building out the style guide and bringing all of that over into Framer. We built this really ugly website that we could actually preview right here, and we could see that it's responsive, so there's differences in the layout. As I move into our tablet view, I have a little bit of a difference there as well. If I move into my mobile view, I have differences. So we explore the idea of our infinite canvas, this web development tool that feels very much like a design tool. It is a design tool. You could design directly in Framer if you wanted to, but the biggest thing that we did yesterday was we really addressed 2 things, was building out that initial style guide, which I've kind of just doctored up here a little bit, so we have a really, really clear understanding. And in building that style guide, we built our assets panel. So we have all of these things that are visually kind of showcased here as actual document styles or website styles, our heading text styles, our link styles, our color styles. We started to build all of those yesterday. And then we also addressed one of the other really big things that you need to know inside of Framer, and that's just dealing with spacing and sizing when we bring elements on the canvas. For instance, we're now in our layers panel here in the top left. You see we're working on our desktop version here that's set at 1200 pixels. When we do that, we've actually set the entire thing as a stack. A stack is an auto layout in Figma. An auto layout in Figma is a stack in Framer. These 2 ideas are interchangeable, okay? So when you hear me say stack, if you're a Figma user, think, oh, auto layout. So we've set the entire canvas of our website to a stack. That way everything will stack from top to bottom. So we set that thing to be stacked, and it's going to fit all the content for the height. So as we start to add new content inside of our design, for instance, let's say this big white block here was an image, we could just continue to add, and our website is going to expand with the expansion of the content. But we also set a fixed width here for our website, 1200 pixels. And that fixed width is actually fantastic because it's going to determine the breakpoints. So anything past 1200 is going to be our desktop layout. Anything below 1200, so 1199 to 810 is going to be tablet, and anything below 809 is going to be our mobile design. So that fixed width is going to establish those breakpoints, but all of our content inside most likely should be set to fill. So we're going to fill that width. We're going to take up that space. Now later on we'll talk about max widths and min widths and how you do it, and we'll build all of the website using these basic functions or these basic principles that we talked about yesterday. We got some people jumping in the chat, and we are going to go right along. So if you want to design along with me, develop along with me, make sure you grab that template, and we're going to jump right in. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is, I've had fun with my tablet and my mobile, but I'm actually just going to design everything in the desktop first, and then we'll worry about those responsive elements. So let's build our very first piece of our layout, and then we'll start breaking into the responsive nature of things. I'm going to get rid of some of the elements that I've placed here on my canvas, and now we have the shortest, ugliest, dumbest looking website of all time. We can do that if we want. We can press publish with that. It's not going to be very attractive to clients and users who are checking out our website. Well, we are now going to go back over to our Figma file and we're going to take a look at what we should be building. We have a navigation up top, and navigation is actually a little bit more of a complex thing. So we're going to throw in a placeholder navigation for now, and we're going to come back and style that thing out because navigation is going to start to open up a can of worms that has to do with components, links, interactions, prototyping. So for now, we're going to lean on Framer and put in a temporary navigation. So let's come back to Framer knowing that we need a navigation up here. I'm actually just going to select and zoom in on my element or my website here, and I'm going to go into insert, and we have this handy dandy menu on the left hand side. We have all sorts of really cool things. We have entire page sections that we can add in, or specific sections. So if maybe I want a landing page like this, if I click this, it's just going to add the whole thing in, which is nice. If I just want a specific section, like maybe a header here with like some buttons and call to action and an image behind it, I could drop one of those in. I'll show you that really quickly. We could just simply click here, and Framer's going to do that work and drop that predefined section in there for us. And it's already pre-styled. Everything's laid out. You'll notice if I come back to my layers panel, we have a new stack in there, and that is this new header image, this whole section that's there. We don't want that. We're going to do everything a little bit custom, and we were really looking for navigation. So why don't we come back to that insert menu and roll down to this amazing little navigation section here. Why don't we grab a really standard navigation, like maybe we'll take this one right here, and Framer is going to go ahead and insert that for us. Now I'm going to zoom in on my template, on my file, and now that everything's in a stack, really interesting, I could just, on my keyboard, I can press the up and down arrows, just like auto layout in Figma, and I can move things around in my layout, which is super convenient. That's so helpful. Like, we love that. We want that. Okay. So we're going to just come back over to our design, and you'll notice that in my design in Figma, it looks like my navigation kind of spans the width of the website no matter what. But over in Framer, it seems like we have some sort of padding going on for the entire website. Now, this is going to be where I'm going to infer a little bit of my preference and my workflow. Some people will work with a global padding structure, and maybe there's a time and a place for it that works and doesn't work. But I will say 9 times out of 10, what I actually want to do is I want to take the padding off of my entire website. You can see over here in my right-hand properties panel, I have 60 pixels of padding around the entire website. Let's get rid of that. Let's just drop it down to 0. And you'll see my navigation tucks in there really nicely. It's wonderful. But then we have that problem, right? Where my text, if I was just to do like a line break like this, my text is going to press all the way out to the outside. Right? We don't necessarily want that. We don't want our website to look like this. This is really unruly. So again, the solve that you might have had was to put global padding across the whole thing. But my preference, my solve, and I think a lot of people's solve, is going to be to make sure that you wrap all of your text, everything that you're building, inside of sections and what we call wrappers, which I'll explain in a second. And we're going to set those to fill, but we're going to set some max widths on those. Let me explain to you what that means. You'll see here that throughout my website, it looks like the majority of the sections, even though as I start to look at this website and the width of it is around 1440, looks like a lot of the content, if I was to hit Shift R and open up the rulers here, it looks like a lot of the content actually is walking down this line on the left-hand side. And you can see the bounding boxes of my content are kind of matching that. Well, what's the width of these containing elements that I've set? Looks like the width there is about 1200 pixels. Now, 1200 pixels is actually the size of our website. If we wanted to be true to form, we could pump our website up to match the layout that we had in Figma of 1400 pixels. I think that's a little wide. I think 1200 is a much more common size for people who are viewing websites on laptops. Maybe think of a Mac, MacBook Pro, like a 13-inch. 1400 pixels is actually going to start spreading a little wide. So we probably should have designed that template over in Figma at around 1200 pixels to be safe. We didn't do that, but we can fix it here in Framer, no problem. So because we have 1200 pixels set here, we're probably going to want to start wrapping all of these elements. Notice here that they're just kind of flowing out, in La La Land. Like, we're going to have a piece of text here, and we're going to have this kind of chip element and a button. And if I was to start kind of placing those inside, why don't we do that really quickly? I have a headline here. I'm going to actually take this and I'll just use my styles that we have set up over here in the right-hand panel. I'll use body text there. Why don't we pop that one up above? What did it say there? Join, not join to waitlist, but join the waitlist. Let's do that instead. Join the wait list, something like that. And you can see that text is spanning all the way. See those blue bounding boxes all the way to the edges? That's what we're going to fix right now. Let's pop this down below. Looks like we also had some text in here. Why don't we just grab this text and pop that in? And it looks like we had a button that says get started. So why don't we come down here and just type the words get started, and we know that's going to be a button, and thankfully we have some button text, like a style set up for that. So we're just going to kind of prep our button. Now this is what we would call kind of like our hero section or our lockup that we have going on here. Underneath that we have a pretty big element, like maybe this big image element. We could actually grab that thing right now, this whole image element, and I could, you know, export this out, get it on my desktop, import it, or I could just use that handy dandy Figma to HTML with Framer. I can grab that whole thing. You can see it says it's copied the layers. All I have to do is paste it in Framer. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to click on that button so that whatever I add adds below it. I'll just hit Command or Control V. You can see Framer's going to do that work and paste the whole thing in. Look at this. We're starting to build a little bit of a website. Now the whole thing feels, again, a little bit unruly. It feels like there's no rules it's really following. It's kind of just stacking everything up, and it's just pushing everything out to the very edges, and I don't even have a lot of responsive nature to it. We're going to solve all of that, but back to this main idea, which is containing sections. So we've created this hero section over in Figma. We need to kind of contain that section here in Framer as well. And all this content that we talked about is part of it. Our navigation is separate. We're going to keep that out. We're going to grab everything from that little top chip all the way down to this image. Why don't we just name this our hero image in our layers? Always name your layers, kids. And we're going to grab all of those, and we can either right click on those and we can say add to stack, or we can add them to, we can just use this hotkey. Now you might be seeing this other command right above it that says add to frame. What's the difference between a frame and a stack? Well, this is going to be just like in Figma, and let's go demo it in a place that's really easy to demo. I have, for instance, the ability to grab all of these elements. Let's say I'm going to grab these color elements. We'll drag a new one out here. All of these are currently just grouped together. We can ungroup these really quickly, and we just get them out. Drag them out of whatever that was. You can see each of these are their individual elements. I could draw a frame around them, and now they're all contained. They're together. I can move them around as one unit, but all of these are kind of just loosely placed. This is kind of like what we call absolute positioning inside of website development, front-end development, inside of Framer. They don't have any defined structure to them, right? And again, we can remove the background so we can see they're placed in any way I want them to be placed inside of this frame. But if I was to add auto layout to this, you can see immediately it becomes structured. That auto layout frame is going to suck up and actually create some sort of predefined structure. My layout is currently moving from left to right. I can make it move from top to bottom. So when we add layout, auto layout in Figma, we have layout control, and that parent container now dictates quite a bit of the behavior of the children inside, the children being all of the elements. Well, that's the same thing over here in Framer, right? So if we want to add things to a frame, we can do that. We'll just simply add them to a frame, and they're just kind of loosely contained, right? I can move them around. I can do all of that. But the minute I take that frame and I decide to add a layout to it, just like that, we've added it to a stack. We could have done it those other ways by right-clicking or hitting that hotkey, but now it's in a stack. We also have other forms of layout control. We have CSS grid rock in here, but a lot of times stacks are going to be the hotness. They're going to be the magic that you need. So now we have this stack. Like any other stack, I can take elements and move them around, but I can also dictate what's going to happen to the children inside through controlling the stack. For instance, if I want to put everything going from left to right, I can do that. See how they're stacked now from left to right, top to bottom. I can move things and push them over to the left. I can change the way that they're distributed. I can wrap elements. There's all sorts of little goodies. I can change the gap space that we have in between things. Currently it's set to 10. Maybe I want to expand that. We can do that. Now, again, red flag, warning, caution. I created a stack here, and you'll notice as I start to change the gap, things start to move outside, like top and bottom. It's cutting everything off. You know the answer to this. That's that basic size and kind of positioning issue that we had before. We need to move this from being height of fixed to height of fit content. When we do that, look at that. It immediately kicks it over. It respects the growing size of our family here, our stack, and everything grows together. So that feels really, really nice. We've put everything together inside of a stack. What I want to do is rename this and just call it Hero Section. And my naming convention is actually going to be to call things section dash whatever it is. So section hero, we have this beautiful section hero. Now we can put it together, and you can see there's some sort of kind of like static nature to the width as well. Again, that's another one of our sizing issues. We can see the width of that stack is 1200. Maybe that's it. Maybe that's good for you. But in the world of responsive websites, probably not so good, right? We want to be able to respond. And so what we want to do is we want to fill the width of the parent container. So now we kind of have a multi-tiered parent-child relationship. Stay with me. I don't want to blow your mind right now, but we had back here in Figma, we talked about setting up an auto layout. We now have a parent, that's the auto layout frame, and we have the children, right? And they have some control, but they are mainly dictated by the parent. Well, we can do that in multiple tiers. Now we have, for instance, our individual elements inside. Those are all of our children, and they are nested comfortably inside of their parent called Section Hero. But that parent is nested comfortably inside of another auto layout called Desktop. It's kind of like a parent, child, parent, grandparent. And we are going to create this beautiful family tree. Everything starts to respect one another. This is how we create really, really beautiful, responsive, seamless websites, okay? So what we're saying is, hey, children, we want you to spread the width, span the width, and always fill the width of your parent, Mr. or Mrs. Section Hero. Section Hero, we want you to do the same. We want you to span the width. As soon as we've done that, we preview, we now get all of this sort of responsive nature. Now our image is really funky, but just check the text. Look how beautiful that text is. It's starting to respond, okay? Beautiful, wonderful. That's exactly what we want, okay? Now, you'll notice we're still getting that issue when we preview where the text is butting right up against the edge. And this is how we started the conversation. We had that global padding. Well, why don't we instead set a little bit of padding here on the Section Hero? Like, for instance, we could put something like 32 pixels of padding on the Section Hero. Now, when we press play, look at that. It looks like we have this nice, beautiful, consistent line. It's always going to kind of break or wrap the lines before we hit the edge. We're building websites, y'all. We're making stuff look beautiful right now. Why don't we fix this quick little image issue that we have here because we don't like what's happening there. You can see the fact, the problem is that we're not locking the constraints here. So we want this to be filled. We want to fill the width, but it's also going to try to respect the height. And boom, as soon as we did that, now we have nice ebbing and flowing, and it's not warping our image. See how much yesterday we said so much of your problems are going to be solved here in the sizing area. And that's just a simple quick fix every time you insert new elements. We've actually got a pretty decent layout going here, but we do have this problem. And this is a little bit of a conversation to have when it comes to developing websites is, do you want to have a max width or do you not want to have a max width? Some people would love it for their websites to continually grow. If I'm looking at this on a 32-inch monitor, man, that image is going to continue to grow and that text is going to continue to span if it can. But some people would argue that there should probably be a reasonable max width for your containing elements, or what we call wrappers. Okay, you can see inside here we have this section. It's wrapping all of the content, and so maybe we want to set a max width there to limit the growth. Let it grow, let it shrink, let it ebb and flow and be responsive. But at a certain point, let's control it a little bit, and we can use max width to do so. So we're grabbing Section Hero here. We're just going to come over here to the right-hand properties panel, and look at that. We can add a min or max width. Why don't we add a max width to this section? And this is where we can start to set a fixed width, okay? So let's respect that 1200, and if I just type pixel in after and hit enter, it's gonna turn it into a fixed max width. And you know what? Since our actual screen size is 1200, why don't we set this to something even a little bit less? Maybe something like 1000 as a max width. Look at that. We'll just notice there that it immediately kind of captured it and shrunk it inside of that max width, right? So we can shrink down and we get responsive. As we start to grow, it's never going to grow above that max width. Now, developing websites in Framer is very interesting because we basically are just designing the site and adding all the properties that we want. But please keep in mind that we're building websites. So all of this does inevitably end up becoming code. And what we're doing right now is we're actually coding max widths onto these elements, this wrapper, this containing element that we've created. In other platforms, or let's say you're going to hand code a website right now by yourself. If I was to do this, I would probably create what's called a class, a CSS class. And that's a reusable element that I could tack onto any piece of code, any containing element or a div where I have stuff inside of it. And I can say class of max width 1000, or I could call this a class of wrapper. And inside of that wrapper, it's going to have a max width. And I can take that class and I can apply it to every other thing that I do on my website, right? So I could come in here and say, hey, I'm going to build a new frame down below. So I could just write F here and I could push this frame inside and I'd be able to put some sort of class on it that's called class wrapper, and it would do all those things. And I could add all sorts of stuff in front end code. That class of wrapper could say, the background's going to be blue, the size is going to be this, the corners are going to be like this, and it just happens. Those styles, this is what CSS means, cascading style sheets, those styles would cascade. Now, we don't have this ability to do classes inside of Framer, and that can actually be a plus because those can get pretty messy to maintain. You start creating combined classes, and if you don't know how to build websites, let me just tell you, sometimes it can be a little bit of a pain, and that starts to get away from this idea of designers being able to create websites without having to think and program any sort of code. So that's why Framer exists. That's what it does best. And so the way that we would do this is we would style a section, a wrapper, like the way that we've done, a section hero. And then we would just reuse that section hero anytime we do something. So for instance, I could just copy it right now and I can add another one of these down below. I could delete all the content that was inside of that section hero, and I can just rename this, and I'm going to put a little question mark here, and this is what I like to do, is now I have a section that is living here and it's waiting, and I could actually just maybe add one piece of text inside of it and it starts to respond, okay? And I'm just going to put the word section in here. That's a big H1, right? And now we have a section. Anytime I want to create a consistent line, and you'll notice this, like maybe I want to add another image inside of this section, and maybe we would rename this section to be like section value propositions, section testimonials, section footer. We're going to have all of these sections running down the page, these containing elements. Get in this thought process with me. When I do that, all of them have that same consistent, those sizing settings that we've given them, right? They're set to a certain width. They auto expand the height. They have a 1000 pixel max width to all of them. This is great news for us because when I go ahead and preview my website, I can actually start to scroll down. Look at this nice, beautiful, firm line that we get down the side here. Everything is going to max out there, and that's where we get consistency in our y-axis, in our vertical axis, okay? If you have questions, feel free to ask them. I know TT over there on YouTube is asking a question. We're going to get to that question, but please start asking questions and I will respond and answer to them personally because I'm very excited to be here with you today during this live stream series. This is what it's all about, is learning live and being able to have some hands-on interaction. Now I have this beautiful section, this consistency, and I can create as many of these as I want, right? You can see in my layers panel. So I can have multiple sections going down. I'm just going to click off of it. I'm going to hit Control L, and that's going to collapse all of my layers. Look at all those sections I have on my website. Look at this thing. Now I get to fill those sections with whatever I want. What do I want? Well, I'm probably going to want to fill it with all of these because, again, we're building these reusable sections. So I can see this is going to be our section header. This is going to be our section features. This is going to be our section preview. This is going to be our section workflow. This is going to be our section pricing, and on we go. We're starting to build out these wonderful, like, reusable settings inside of Framer. Okay, now we have some background imagery and stuff in here, and we're going to want to start building some buttons. So let's get back to our hero section and actually make this thing like fly really well. Okay, to do that, I'm just going to get in here and I'm going to start looking at my elements that I have. I have this big colorful abstract 3D element that I made. And so we're going to need that. And we also have these background blurs, right? So I'm just going to group those two background blurs together because they seem to be kind of one in the same. And why don't I grab both of these things? I'm just going to rename this thing so I have it. I'm going to call it blur. I'm going to call this abstract 3D, and I'll just call it number 1, numero uno. Why don't we grab both of those? And again, we're going to use that Figma HTML to Framer to copy those assets for us. Again, that copy assets is really just skipping the whole export it out of Figma, import it into Framer, but you could totally do that if you want to, okay? We're going to bring everything now in here. I'm just going to Command V and paste, and boom, we've got those elements in. We can drag them over onto our infinite canvas. Look at all these fun things we have to play with. We got our blur. It's got those two separate pieces behind. We have our 3D image. We're rocking right now. I'm going to drop these into my hero layout, and it's about to just break everything. And we know it's going to break everything. That's fine. It's okay. Stay with me, okay? Why don't I drag this big 3D element in? You can see our stack wants to put it right in line in the flow of the document. I'm going to do the same thing with my blur. It's going to space everything out. Okay, great. Fantastic. It's not quite in there yet. Let's get it inside the layers panel. Man, we just blew everything up, did we not? I'm going to move both of these things. Like, let's just click inside here. We have our blur. We have our abstract element here on top. Why don't we just put those all the way at the top? I'm just clicking up and down on my keyboard because it is a stack. I'm going to go ahead and move them around for me. Okay, great. So they are now inside of my section hero. And this is where we get our next thing that you really need to know. Remember, we really dialed in on this size panel. So many of the fixes that you'll make are here in the size panel. One of the other ones is right above it, and that's the position panel. When we put things inside of an auto layout, inside of one of these stacks in Framer, all those elements need to be relative to the parent. And that's the setting that we have on everything right now. Our text, our image, everything is relative. Did I say relevant? Kind of relevant, but more than that, it is relative. So everything's relative to the parent, right? And it's saying relative basically means, hey, it is a relative. It's connected, and I'm going to do what my parent tells me to do. My parent has told me to stay in the flow of the document. Now, how do we break things out of the flow of the document? How do we give the child just a little bit more freedom, right? How do we tell them, hey, you can go a little further down the street. You can ride your bike around the corner. How do we tell them to make their own choices? Well, we're going to grab that element and we're going to change that setting from relative to absolute position. As soon as we do that, notice how it just, it jumped out of the natural flow of the document, the natural flow of the stack. We could do the same thing with our child that's named Blur. That's a weird name for a child, by the way. And we can just turn that one to be absolutely positioned. Look how it just moved everything back up to the top, right? The rest of our layout is now back up to the top. And now we can actually grab, and if we want to make things really easy on us, we can just right click, select all of those, or we can hit Command L. We can lock the rest of our layout. Now we can grab our absolutely positioned elements and we can drag and drop them. We can move them around. What are we trying to do? We're trying to get them in the background here, right? To match. Let's just move our stuff out of the way. We're trying to get them behind our image to kind of glow up. We want this fun image there as well. We might even animate it. Could be a good time. So how do we do that? You'll notice I have this absolute positioned element. I could try to move it to the bottom. That doesn't actually change anything. Why isn't it not changing anything? Well, that's because we're going to introduce a new feature, this new idea or concept of the Z index. When you put things in absolute position and it's near other things that are relatively positioned, the website has no idea where you want those. The concept of a layers panel and layers actually starts to break down. So we actually need to stylize it And we have different axes inside of design, right? The y-axis runs up and down. You remember because the y is tall. You have the x-axis that runs side to side, but you also have the z-index or the z-axis that runs in 3-dimension, towards you or away from you, towards the camera or away from the camera. And that's the issue we're having right now, is that our blur and our abstract element, they have no z-index, right? That we're not telling it what to do. Currently, our z-index is set to 1. Right? And so we could actually just move that back, set it to 0, and it jumps behind. Why don't we do the same thing with our blur, set it to 0, and it jumps behind all the rest of our content. Now we can grab our elements and we can continue to space them, size them, put them exactly where we want, right? So I'm just going to move my blur first. Why don't we just, and I'm using my keyboard now to kind of blur up a little bit. And we have our abstract shape and we want it to blur or kind of come up and over. And it's really, our layout's starting to get really, really cramped. So why don't we just unlock, right? Command L to unlock everything. Why don't we space them apart? How do we do that? Not with the individual kids that are respecting their parent, that are relatively positioned, but instead we do that by allowing the parent to give the command. Our section hero is a layout, and we can tell it to increase the gap and the spacing of everything. So why don't we just increase a little bit of that gap? Now we're going to run into a little bit of a design principle here of proximity, where we need some things to be a little bit more closely related, right? We want to spread things out, and doing the gap there didn't really help us very much, because if we start to spread things out too much, these pieces of text don't seem like they really belong to anything, right? So we could just kind of go back and check our design. We see that this one is about 24 away, 24 away. Everything's about 24 away. So why don't we jump our spacing back down to 24? Well, why doesn't it look right? Well, it's probably because the bottom of these things, our image is not 24, it's 80. And you can see, actually, all of these elements inside of Figma are actually contained within their own container. We have to introduce another parent-child relationship. We want to grab all of our elements that are inside of our text lock up here and press Command, Control, Enter, and we're going to put those in a new stack. And why do we do that? So that now we can come up and grab our actual grandparent here, our section hero. And this is, I'm going to call this our hero lockup, just so we can like see it really clearly. And this is where we might want to add some padding to the top and to the bottom. So why don't we add some padding here to the top, or actually, instead of doing that, we might want to do padding on our hero lockup to the top and bottom. This is just going to space everything else around it. So we have 32 here. Why don't we jump up to 40 on the top and 40 on the bottom? I think it was 80 and 80, was it not? So let's go up to 80 and 80, and now we have that nice clear space. The breathing room is now there, right? We can come back into our text lockup, our hero lockup here, and just make sure that the gap is appropriate so that it has breathing room of its own. But now we have this nice breathable element that's happening here, right? Okay, great. So far, so good. Let's get back to what we were trying to do there. Why don't we lock our hero lockup? Why don't we grab our hero image? That one's fine. Let's lock that as well. Why don't we get back to that abstract 3D element? It's kind of just peeking out a little bit more. So I'm just going to nudge it up. I'm holding down Shift to nudge it by 10. Our blur seems to be, yeah, kind of like dead center in between that kind of gap there. So I think we're doing well. I like a little bit of it just kind of hinting and glowing. It was really far up here. I don't like that. I like it to go down a little bit more, okay? That feels pretty good. Let's preview our website and just check it out. It's looking pretty good and it's responsive, and we'll deal with some of those responsive movements here a little bit later. But this so far looks pretty good. Why don't we stop really quickly and see if anybody has any questions about the website that we are developing right now. All right, TT says, is there a way to make sure that all headlines have the same distance from the body text, like a kind of framework? Yeah, there is a way that you can do that. Now, again, back to the point I was making earlier, in CSS, you might be able to like always like have very clear kind of like dictation or like determination on how things get spaced. But if you have certain lockups that you really, really like, there's a couple of different ways you can do that. You can obviously just continue to reuse, like the same way that I reused sections down here. Let's say you really, really like this. I'm going to grab this hero lockup. You really like the way that these are spaced. I can just duplicate a version of them. I can, ooh, I'm grabbing the wrong thing here. Let's lock all of our abstract elements so we don't mess with them anymore. And I really like to do that, by the way. Little quick tip, lock stuff so that you don't mess with your layout. I can bring it out here. I can turn it into its own stack. Just turn the color off of it. Make sure that the height of it is fitting the content. And now I have that kind of layout locked in. We don't want to take this a step further. We could actually create a component out of this. That component, just like in Figma, could be some sort of lockup of headline like H1 and body copy, H2 and body copy. Now we have these lockups we could just drag in and start to manipulate. We're going to get into components actually right after these questions, so maybe that'll help you a little bit more. Another question from Curtis, one of my Design Champ pluses. What's up in the house? Side note, if you're not part of the Design Champs, you should definitely just scan the QR code. You can become a free member, or like Curtis, you become a plus member. Curtis gets access to all sorts of extra content, live sessions, courses, and things like that. You jump over in the Design Champs community. I actually just released a couple of really cool courses that are Design Champ mini courses. They're very specific to you. Mastering auto layout in Figma, UI design fundamentals. We got some other cool courses that are starting to build in that library, but you also get access to tons of other really cool stuff. Free events, a form of Dribble where you get to post your work and get feedback, but the plus members get member posts. They get access to like a forum where they can ask questions, video libraries, premium resources. So definitely consider becoming a Design Champ or a Design Champ Plus member to get access to all those cool things. But Curtis asks, would it be feasible to use grids in Framer? You have turned me into a grid monster. I guess the grid work would take place in Figma. Okay, so let's just wrap with me a little bit, if you would, Curtis. When we talk about grids, do we mean setting up like layout structures and grids, or do we mean actually using CSS grid? Because those are two different things. So clarify your question for me a little bit, and maybe I can answer it a little bit better. I'll try to answer it my best right now. I'll tell you that what we've done so far is set up a stack, and that stack is a layout type or a layout feature. We could actually use instead grid, and that's using CSS grid. By determining a certain number of columns and rows, we can start to really dial in and dictate. And we're going to use this actually in a little bit. So yes, layout structure wise, this is what we're talking about, is moving from a stack, this is a very simple left to right or top to bottom kind of situation, or you can move it over to grid, and this is where we can create really interesting grid structures. So again, this is where we're going to do stuff like this later on. We're going to do grids down here. We'll do a 3-column grid right there. We'll do more grids right here. So we will use that grid structure later on. I promise you that. And you'll see more about it. Joshua Nelson says, hey, just randomly found your channel. Quick question. Below the starting column, there is a small space that is not taken. Is that just a sort of safe area so it doesn't fill up, or is that something else? Just below the starting column. Let's see if we can zoom in and get to what our friend Joshua Nelson, our new friend, thanks for being a new watcher. Hey, make sure you are also a new subscriber. Make sure that you ring the bell so you know when all these live streams happen, new videos come out. Let's check out what you're talking about, Joshua. Just below the starting column, let's see, like here, is that what we're talking about? I'm not 100% sure what you mean by that. Let's see. Oh, just below the starting column here. Yeah, so that's really just a design decision. If you're talking about this, like, so that we can have nice, beautiful kind of like showcase of the typographic lockup and the text down below. It's really about honoring white space. If you're asking about white space, spacing, just always ask yourself, WWAD, what would Apple do? Apple would white space. They would add some more breathing room to things. That's why we do that, okay? Mumita says, can you please show us how to do a loading animation before the home page? Yeah, we're going to do some, a loading animation. Yeah, we can do that. We'll do a loading animation. That could be fun. That could be a good time. We'll get there when we get to animations. I think that's day 4. So stay with me. How do you join without scanning the QR code? If you want to go and become a Design Champs member, just go to designchamps.io. That's Design Champs, plural.io, and you can join for free. If you join for free, you get access to a couple things. If you join the Plus membership, you get access to even more. The link's also down in the description. Hey, let's get back to it because we had Munmita's or TT's question about kind of creating a framework. I mentioned components. We're actually going to create our first component right now, which is like really, really fun. Components are just like components in Figma, components in Framer, right? Reusable items. And we're going to do that by creating a button. So let's do that. So we have this get started thing here, and we have like this button style that you'll see all throughout. We're actually going to create kind of a complex button. So let's get into it. It's a pill style button. You'll notice it has a little bit of a border, has a little bit of a glow, and a gradient all happening inside of it. Okay. So what we could actually do if we wanted to like kind of fast forward this process, we could cheat if you want, and we could just Figma to HTML and Framer plugin, come on over, and why don't we paste it inside, and boom, just like that, we got ourselves a button. Okay. So what this is really doing is we have this kind of like link. Let's just rename it over here. Let's call it button, like so. And inside of it, it has a little bit of a border, looks like going on there, and then it has like the actual text. What we want to do is make sure we're using the correct text. So why don't we grab style and hit button text, and we can change the color because it's definitely that dark green inside of our design. Boom, just like that. And the button itself is using a radial gradient, and that's where we're getting that nice little kind of glare in the middle. Pretty cool. We don't actually need the border element there. We could just put a border directly on the button. So I've deleted there was a border layer inside. Don't need to do that. We're just going to select the actual element itself, and then we can get inside here and just look for the border. Why don't we add a little bit of a border? Why don't we make it our dark green like that, and then we'll just bring the opacity of it back. It's an internal border. We're going to jump down to like 25 pixels. That looks pretty stinking close, y'all. Okay, so now we have a little bit of our button. We want to make sure that as our button grows, which it's not right now, we want it to expand, right? So let's make sure, how do we fix this? How do we fix the problem of fix width? You got it. We go back up to the sizing elements, right? Our width needs to fit the content like so, and our text also needs to fit the content. Boom, we've done it just like that. Let's come back up to our button. We're going to need a little bit of padding. Also, we have this top and bottom thing. So why don't we fit the content horizontally and vertically, and why don't we create some padding instead? Okay, something like that looks pretty good. Why don't we drop down to 16? I like it a lot. Okay, so now we have this natural padding all around our button, and our button will continue to grow, hopefully. Wow, let's see. Fit, yep, absolutely. And width of fit, we like that. Let's make it fit the content here as well. Hey, so far so good. It should be working. Okay, so again, our button grows as our text inside of it grows, which is what we want. This is the idea of like setting up a really reusable component before you ever even turn it into a component. How do you do that? How do you turn something into a component? Well, the simple way is to right click on whatever you're working on, and you can actually go right here to the command of create a component. You can also do that with the hotkey of Command Option K. So let's just do it here. Boom. It's going to tell us you're creating a new component. What do you want to call it? I'm going to call this button. I know that's like really clever, but that's what it is. It's a button. All right, so let's create that. And it sends us into the component editing space, the workspace, okay? Notice our breadcrumb up here. We're on the home page, but now we're working on this specific component. Once we're inside of our component workspace, we have a couple of things. I mean, infinite canvas, we can move around. There's our button, just like we talked about. And we can do a couple of things, and we're going to do a couple of things right now, which is we're going to create some variables or properties for our button so that it's super reusable. And then we're also going to create some different states for this button. So let's jump into it. We'll select it. Notice that the name of it is variant 1 primary. So we'll just call this, let's call this green. Okay, and that's our primary. That primary tag is very important because we can create other variants of this. But first thing we want to do is any good button has a hover and or a pressed state. So it always provides it. As soon as we select it, click on hover right here, we will create a new hover state. Notice our prototyping line that happens there, okay? So that's an interaction that's actually happening on our button, and it's baked right in. So now we can make some sort of change. Like, what kind of change do we want to make? Maybe it would be fun to take our radial gradient, and maybe we can expand our radial gradient like that. Maybe even shift it down to the bottom, something like that. And now we can actually jump out really quickly. Let's click on our primary. I'm actually going to press Command or Control P, and you can just preview stuff right here. Notice that when I hover over, I get that nice interaction that's happening, okay? So that feels pretty good. Okay, I like that. That's a very simple little like hover animation. Maybe we want to do one more little thing, and we can either darken or lighten our text. Let's darken it. Yeah, let's go more green. Nah, let's darken it. I think darkening it will be better. Let's go brand green, and then we'll pull it down to this darker state. And let's make sure we got that brand green, and let's pull it up to a little bit of a lighter state like that. Okay, so now we're going to see a pretty decent change in our button. Okay, absolutely. That's really cool. I like that a lot. Okay, we can do way more complex things, but look at that. Now we have our button. We can get rid of that little get started element that was there. Our buttons look a little bit taller than our ones here. I think that we're hitting about a height of 46. Let's see, and this one is, if I was to move it over really quickly, if I wanted to measure it, if I want to go to fixed, we're at about a 51. It's close enough. It's not bad. If you want it to be pixel perfect, you get after it. For me, that looks pretty good. I like it. Okay. So we've now created our interactive button, right? So now we have our hover state in there, which is really, really cool. And we have, so far, responsiveness that's working. I like it a lot. And we have those kind of absolutely positioned elements that we're going to work with when we get into our stuff, which is going to be good. So everything feels good. Let's just set our navigation to fill right now so that it's moving along nicely. Great. Awesome. Okay. So far, so good. We have a decent version of our section. I think we got to build our little chip up here, don't we? We do. So again, we could just do that like by copying, but let's build this one custom. I think that would be good. Why don't we make this width not fill, but fit the content? And right now it's just a piece of text. Why don't we add it into its own little frame or its own little stack, aka auto layout? Command, Option, Enter. Boom, I add it to its own little stack. I'm going to call this a chip. I'm probably going to turn this into a component, and then we're going to do what I said I was going to do with the button component, but didn't get around to it. We're going to add properties and variables to both of these components, which is going to be really fun. Okay, so we have this thing. We want to make sure that we are fitting the content. The text is fitting the content. Great. Just like in Figma, stacks inside of Framer are stylable, that you can create components out of them. So that's what we're going to do right now. We're just going to try to match the style here. It looks like we're using let's see, a fill here. What is our fill? Let's turn our layer panel back on. Here it is. Yeah, it looks like we are using actually just kind of like a faded white inside of it, but it's actually kind of translating to be more of like a gray color. So let me just grab that color really quickly. I have my chip. It's stacking left to right. Doesn't really matter. It's going to be single line. Left to right works, though, in case I want to put any sort of other little element like an icon inside of it. I like that a lot. So why don't we just change the fill here? And I'm going to pop in my 161616. I might use that. So why don't we turn that into a new style? We're going to call this neutral dash 100. And actually, I've been using slashes for stuff. So why don't we call it neutral slash 100? Okay, great, like that. We're going to do a little bit of padding like we did before. Maybe 8 pixels like that. And then why don't we do a little border radius, because that's what's happening there. I always just like to do 360 to guarantee that it is going to, encapsulate everything. It also has a little bit of a border, so let's add that border in. I'm just pointing out, this might seem really tedious, but I'm pointing out all these little things so that you see that it's just like a design tool. It is a design tool, right? We're doing all of this not in code, but instead we're doing it inside of all the selectors over here on the left-hand side. I'm going to click white. I'm going to bring the stroke of that down. And you know what? I'm going to do some custom padding on this because I feel like it's a little bit tall on the top and bottom. Doesn't need to be so tall, but I think I need just a little bit more oomph on the left and right-hand side. So we're going to go 4 and we're going to go 16, these custom kind of paddings there. That's really, really good. I think that's just about perfect. And it looks like it's pure white, and we have this one not being a pure white. So why don't we make it a pure white like that? Feels really good. And okay, great. I like that. That's great. That is going to be a component. So why don't we turn that into a component? Command Option K. Boom. We're going to call that our chip component. Could rename it if we want. Let's just call it our chip, like so. Great. Now, this is where we're going to add those. We're going to do it here and also to the button. We're going to add those variables or those properties just like you could inside of Figma, so that we don't have to constantly double click inside of things. we're going to create what I like to call our own little control panel for each component that we can control things, instances of that component and all of its elements right there when we place it on the canvas. We don't have to create multiple variants of stuff, and we shouldn't need that, right? We should be able to control things. Like for instance, one of the simplest things I probably want to control is the text that goes inside here. Now that I have this component, you can see I have an instance of it out here. I could grab another one from my assets up top, and I could just drag that thing out and boom, just like that. But what happens if I want to change the text? You would maybe first instinct try to double click on it. Can't, right? It's just going to bring you into component editing space. That's not what we want. What we want is to be able to control the text inside of our design project. To do that, I'm going to select the text, and just like in our favorite design tool, we have some options right here. I'm actually going to press content, and I'm going to create a variable. It's just going to be plain text. I just want to write in a little plain text field. And when we do that, we get our variables menu. What is this going to be? It's going to be our label. We're building our control panel right now, right? And we could add a description. Probably don't need one. We're going to call this the default that's going to be sitting there is chip label. Does it have a placeholder? It doesn't need a placeholder. You know, or maybe we could just say join the wait list, something like that. Is it a text area, like a text box? Nah, it's just going to be a single line because we want to control these a little bit. I'm going to click off of that, and now I've added that content variable to it. When I come back, look at what we just created. We created our own little variable space, our own little chip component that has some different controls down below. So now if I delete this one, nothing's inside. You see a little placeholder inside here says join the wait list. We could do that. Join the wait list. Beautiful. We've added it, and now we can edit each of these. And if I want to edit the component, the master, I can click right there. If I want to edit the content that's inside, I can actually click here on the label. I can go back, and we can like change any of the stuff that's in there, right? Okay, beautiful. I love it. It looks really good. Let's do the same thing for a button, shall we? You can see our button has no controls in our little control center. Let's click on that. Let's do the same thing there. And we're going to see something really cool happen here, actually, which is kind of fun. So why don't we, just for fun, really quickly, before we change that, why don't we add what's called a variant? We added a hover state. We probably need a new variable state, right? So imagine if you need a green button, maybe there's a white button, maybe there's a black button, maybe there's an outlined button. Do we have to create separate components for all of those? No, that's not what we do in our design tool. And since Framer's a design tool, we don't have to do that either. So we're just going to click variant 2. Notice that I named the first one green. Why don't we name this one? Let's just name it white. Let's make a white button. That'll be nice. And to do that, it's a variant of the primary. That's why the word primary is so important. We're going to come over here and just change the fill. Why don't we just change it to a normal thing right there? And then inside, we'll change the color. We'll just use pure black, our dark color that we have. And now that variant can actually have its own hover state. So why don't we create a hover state? And what do we want to do? What do we want to do? Why don't we change it to like brand light, that light color green? That works for us. We have that nice hover happening now. We like it. Everything feels good. Okay. Now what can I do here? Well, let's go back one more time and show the cool thing is we need to create that content management there as well, right? So let's just go back in. Right now it says get started. We want to create a variable, plain text. We're going to call this button label, like so. Default's there, the placeholder none. That's fine. We'll just go just like so. Great. And now we have a control panel. But notice in our control panel, what else do we have? Not only can we change the button text here, but we also have access to the different variants right here from our actual design. So I can go, hey, give me the white button, give me the green button, and they're all managed from that single component system. That component has multiple variants. That variant has its own hover, its own active state, all those kinds of things. It's a great system, okay? So let's see. Somebody had a question down in the chat on my Jesse Pinkman. No, I'm just me. I'm just Jesse Showalter. All right, I don't wish I was Jesse Pinkman. Pretty happy being me. Okay, let's move on. All right, so we have almost entirely created or recreated the design for our main section here, okay? We're going to create maybe one more section, and we'll see how we do. And we might have to recreate these cards really quickly. But then what we'll focus on for the rest of the stream is to actually just focus on the focus on the responsive layouts of all of these. And we might hit navigation right now as well. Okay, so let's do that. We are going to move on to our next section. And what I like is, again, I could, if I wanted to, I could just copy everything that I got going on here. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to grab this hero lockup. I'm going to come down to my next section, and I believe that next section has to do with features. So I'm going to call this section dash features, like that. Boom, because it has the same style, all that padding and max width and stuff. Oh, I love efficiency. It makes my life so good. I'm going to come inside of that new section features. I'm going to grab this element. I'm going to paste. Let's get rid of this old one. Now we have, again, check it out. TT was asking earlier, what about the consistency for the lockups? Hey, we have this lockup section here, right? So why don't we, instead of calling this hero lockup, why don't we just call this lockup or text lockup? Because we basically just reused our text lockup, and it's got all the same spacing and gap inside of it. And because look, our next section, it features a chip, a headline of some sort, a smaller headline, but also some body copy. So it should probably have that same consistency. This one does not have a button. We just delete it out of there really quickly. It's going to have an H2 instead of an H1. So why don't we grab our H1 and just swap that over to an H2. Oh, it's perfection. Everything is coming together. Why don't we just see what our text says here? It says features. This says explore powerful features. Let's do that. Beautiful. And we could change the text here to say features. And then we had some text underneath it. Boom, like that. Why don't we just update that as well? Oh, it's so wonderful how fast that happened. We just built out that text lockup. Why? Because we had it built already. So we just keep leaning on what we've already done. I'm going to delete a couple of these extra sections. Boom, boom. I just need one. In case I need it, it is there for me. And you know what? Why don't we just really quickly, wait, if I need a section, I'm probably going to need like a text lockup, okay? So pretty cool. I'm just going to section with lockup. Man, I can use that later if I need it. Wonderful. I'm so happy about everything that's happening right now. Join the wait list. We got our features section. What's happening underneath? We got a series of cards. Okay, so we could rebuild all of this. Why don't we cheat really quickly and just grab one? And this time we will use the Figma to HTML to Framer plugin. It's going to copy those layers. Let's bring it over. Let's just collapse Control L and just open up just our section so it doesn't get messy. I like to do that a lot as I'm working. Collapse the layers, just focus on what you're focusing on, which is this specific section, right? I'm going to be inside here like so. I got my actual section feature selected so that when I paste, it pastes it directly inside. Now notice that we're going to point out something really cool here. Notice that it pasted it in. Obviously, you guys are champs at this moment. By this point, you understand that there's a sizing issue going on here. We can fix that really, really simply, right? But what's also happening here is something we haven't discussed is containing elements and clipping the content or hiding the content that extends outside of them, right? We do this all the time inside of Figma. If I go back to Figma and let's say I have, for instance, something like this, I'm going to take my element. Notice how the content gets clipped as it starts to extend outside of this container. Well, that's because we have our content set to clip inside of Figma. So we can unclip that. Notice that it shows. But now the parent container also is clipping the content. Look at that. So we can have these things kind of hanging off the side. We just need to unclip the content. The same concept exists here inside of Framer, except we don't call it clip content. We call it visibility. Okay. So for instance, we have things that are being clipped outside, things that are extending outside of our parent container, our section features here. Where do we fix that? What do we do with that? You can just roll down right to here. It should be here at least. Boom, we got a section there and it says overflow. Okay, so what do we do with all the content that's flowing over or overflowing? Right now it's set to hidden. We could set it to visible and all of a sudden it expands past it. Now that becomes a little bit of a design choice, a little bit of a functionality choice. What do you want to do with it? We don't need it actually to overflow because we're trying to contain everything. So I could keep it on, I could turn it off. It doesn't really matter. My bigger issue is the sizing of this individual element. because it's certainly currently set to fixed at 1200 width. Why don't we set it to fill instead? That's going to shrink it down inside. That is much better for us, okay? So when we do that, again, we get a little bit of weirdness happening inside. That's okay. We're going to get rid of that little text link. We're going to fix all of this really quickly. This is a chip. Hey, we have a component for that. Why don't we grab our assets and just pull our chip in? And it's a little bit different. Oh, I think we need a variant. A little bit of a lighter variant, because this one's using let's see, our fill is, it's like a little bit more of that like light color. So here's a new color. Why don't we just really quickly come here and we'll edit our component. I'm going to create a new variant of it, and I'm going to call this one was variant 1, or the primary one. We'll call this one dark. Why don't we call this next one light? Something like that. What's the background of our chip gonna be? We get to figure it out right now. Currently, it's using neutral 100. Why don't we move it to that lighter version and then create a style out of it, okay? That'll be good. And I'm gonna sneeze. That was such a satisfying sneeze. You ever sneeze on a live stream? I do all the time. Okay, so now we have our neutral, and this one actually should be 100. So let's do neutral dash 300 here really quickly. Let's go over to our assets. Let's fix our naming convention. I'm not liking what's happening. Usually it gets darker as it gets higher, right? So why don't we just rename this one to be neutral 200, and now we will rename this one to be neutral 100. We're going to go from light to dark like that. Okay, great. So we're using our neutral 100 there on that chip. That feels really good. My friend Wendy Robello, who's Robledo, pardon me, who is also one of my design champs, said, "Bless you." Thank you, Wendy. I appreciate you. I also think like the text here is a little bit bigger than is what is currently here. We're using it's 14. What do we got going on here? What do we got going on here for our text? Our body, and we could just like look at it. It's using 18. So we need a new style here, folks. Let's get it out of the body here and jump it down to 14, right? And we'll call this our chip text. So let's create a new style out of it, shall we? Boom, like this. Yeah, let's go new style. We'll call this a new paragraph style, but it's okay because we're going to rename this. We're going to name this, where did it go? Over here. Bop, 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 bop. That body 2 is our little 14. We might actually, if we want to, call it body large, body small, but this one specifically is for the text. So why don't we just rename it to be chip text? Oh, I love it. I really like capitals apparently, so let's keep that system going. Great. Now we have the chip text being used. Boom. Let's just find it. Chip text, like so. Click off of it, click back on, and now it's using the chip text. Okay, now our chips are going to look right, and we have the light version of our chip. So why don't we just swap that over to our light version? It looks so much better, and we can call this feature numero uno, like that. Beautiful. Okay, let's get rid of it. Pop. We don't need the old one. We had all sorts of things going on here with this chip. Created it in a really weird way. Okay, now you notice I'm deleting things. I'm back to that drag and drop kind of like system. We don't like that though, do we? We really want it to be all in line. And we had some nice 16 pixel spacing between elements, which is really nice if you like an 8-pixel grid. So why don't we just grab these elements really quickly? They belong in a grid, in a stack, don't they? So let's just stack them real quick. Let's stack them from top to bottom. And this is where we'll get into maybe some of those different properties or ways you can do it. So I want everything to be aligned to the left, right? And I want things to be aligned to the start, which is kind of the top. That way, if it expands, we can handle it. And I don't want to be absolute positioned. What I want is my width to fit the content, which it's doing. That's really nice. We're gonna have to change the parent to change some of these issues, okay? So a lot of times I'll bring things in like this, and then I'm like, okay, I gotta fix them, and I have to framerize them a little bit before I get it back in. So why don't we just spread this out a little bit more? Get rid of this. We have this fake button thing happening. We don't need this fake button. What else is going on in our thing? It did have a button in it. So boom, 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 boom. Let's do that. Let's rework our stack. Get this up. Beautiful. Let's go to our assets, drag a button inside of our stack. Look at how nice it is. Get started, feature 1. Let's get the text really quickly, shall we? AI powered. I think this is our heading 3. It sure is. See how nothing changed, but the style was applied? Ah, that's amazing. Okay, here we go. Then we're going to do our body text like that, but our body text for some reason is set to always be center aligned. We don't want that. Or we could just rock it like this. Also, the line height is a little bit loose there. So let's fix that line height, because this line height was set at about 28. But let's just go in actually and just do a change to our body copy. Here's our body copy. We want it to always be left aligned, and we want the line to be more, the line height to be more like 20, like that, 20 pixels. Beautiful. Okay, that should be good. Let's see if we can get it to be good here. Is it maybe like, yeah, it was having like lines put in between. That's really weird. That's a strange thing. Sometimes you'll come upon weird issues. Okay, so let's just make sure our text box is fitting. It's fit text. That feels good. It's good. We want our text, and this is kind of another one of those layout things. I personally, workflow thing, I like text to fill the parent container. I like the text not to be fixed, but to fill the parent container. Whoops, sorry. Height, I want it to fit the content, and width to fill the parent container. Right, because guess what? Then I could actually start to width. I can make a fixed width here. I can stretch it out, and it will hopefully start obeying and being responsive. This is responsive, and this is what I like, okay? Great. So now we have our kind of like feature text lockup here. Looks pretty good. Very, very like on par with what's going on there. And now we have our image. Now, let's see. It's brought in, let's see, what do we have here? We have our background, and it has a little glow inside of it. It has the element, and it has a border. We could probably get rid of the border and do the border natively, right? Looks like a white, like off-white type border. So why don't we add that? Boom. Let's go light, but bring our border down. That feels a little bit better. And we're going to call this 3D element box like that. Okay, so now you have your feature lockup, and I can't spell the word lockup apparently, like that. Okay, and you have your 3D box element right there. Okay, now these are both of these are like these awesome elements. They're sitting inside of a frame. We don't like that. Why would we want that? We want to turn layout on. Oh, we turned on the stack. We made it move from left to right. We love it. We love it so much. Now, notice this is where some of those layout options come in. It's set to center. It's going to try to bring all the text into the center, right? Or do we want it to have space between, which is going to push it out to the edge, space around, space evenly. These are options you can have. I like space around. What that's going to do for me is it's going to, when this card stretches, the elements are going to stretch with it. But what makes it even more powerful is when you start to, now that we have it set up as a stack, this text element inside can be set to fill. Oh, beautiful, like that. And now we just need a little bit of, not space around, but we can do space evenly. Oh, we got to go. Oh, let's actually go start here. And we set the gap instead. Okay, set the gap in between, and this is where we can more manually manage. Let's set some padding around the outside, something like 40. So now we've manually set it, right? And it's always going to try to start here on the left-hand side, and our text lockup here is set to fill, so it's going to fill the space. Our image stays there. These are these little nuances of layout. You could do this lots of different ways. This was the scenario that I needed right now in this moment, okay? So, and we got a couple more questions that are happening in the chat, and we will get there soon, I promise, okay? Notice that as I start to stretch this out vertically, I change the height of it, like things are staying in the middle. And that's because I have things kind of aligned in that way, right? Okay, cool. So boom, everything's good there. I like this card. I like it a lot. It's a lot better than this broken janky card. Why don't we call this feature card? Do I want to turn this into a component? Maybe. I have a couple of them in my design. Would it make sense to turn it into a component and then have a left aligned variant? I think it might actually. So why don't we just turn this into a component? Sorry, Command Option K, feature card, create that component. Really quickly, I'm just going to create the variant. And because it's in a because it's inside of a stack, all I have to do is change it from left to right, right to left. I just moved on my keyboard. Now all of a sudden we have variant 1, variant 2. Those names are fine for me. I'm going to bring this card in, and I'm just going to make sure that the width set to fill. I like it. It's good. And then if I don't like it, if it's a little too tight, maybe I need to shrink the size of the element. Well, I can do all of that, but I can do it inside at the component level. Why don't we edit the component, and we can just bring the size of this whole thing down. It is a bit much, is it not? Okay, let's take the 3D element box. There we go. I'm going to shrink it down like that. Maybe that's a little bit better. Maybe we want to go a little bit taller. Maybe we just keep it like that. Maybe does that look a little bit better? It looks a little bit more better, like a little more appropriately spaced, right? Okay, so now we have our feature card. Get rid of the broken one down below. Look at this, copy paste, pop that in, change the variant from variant 1 to variant 2. Holy cow, we just built that layout like that, folks. Okay, we got a little bit more space in between them, and that's fine. Why don't we grab these and put them in a stack like so, and then why don't we change the gap spacing in between them like that? I love it. Okay, so obviously inside of our component, we're going to want to go into that feature card component and change the image that goes there, and have a spot to change all the text. That gets a little bit boring for me to do, but just like we did with our other components, we want to create all the variables for this component as well. Okay, so just keep that in mind. And with that done, I tell you what we might think about doing. We might grab this section, get it out of here, and just preview our website as is. Looks pretty good so far. We got some overflow issues there that we will fix. We changed our text style, so we see a little issue there. We're just going to override that and make it center aligned. Same thing for our text up above. We're going to override and go center align. I would prefer my text, my standard body copy, to be left aligned, and then override it in the instances where it needs to be center aligned, right? That's me. That's just me personally. Also, this is set to fill, and so it's really, really wide. Maybe you can see in our design, it is one line. Maybe that's a little bit long for us. Maybe we could set a max width on it, on the text itself, if we wanted to. You can see here, like, it looks a little bit better when it's kind of 2 lines and not one long line. So why don't we do that really quickly? Why don't we add a max width to our text, and we'll do like max width of like 600 pixels, like that. I like that. I like that quite a bit. So why don't we do the same thing up here? Max width 600 pixels, kind of wraps it. It feels really good. Like 2 lines is, shorter lines is better than one really long illegible line. I like this quite a bit. Okay, so our website's looking pretty good. Why don't we just publish it really quick? We'll update and get it up to our staging server. And then boom, we will hit the preview in our browser. Okay, looks pretty good. Looks not so shabby so far. We're going to do some interaction stuff. Why don't we go back over to Framer and come out of the preview? We'll just handle this overflow issue, right? Our image down below, we want that not to be hidden, but visible. It pops out. Looks really cool. Why don't we actually grab that, that abstract element there and just shrink it down a little bit so it doesn't pop out so far. There we go, because we don't want it to drip and bleed into our bottom section. But I do like, it makes a really kind of like static looking or like standard looking layout look a little bit more dynamic when we have elements like that kind of jumping out. Okay, cool. So I think we've fixed all the problems. Now it's time to, we've kind of built our perfect layout, right? The start of it, at least. We'll continue on in the rest of our series, but why don't we start adding these and trying to figure out the responsive nature to them? We'll make a couple tweaks and we'll probably be done for the day because we've done a lot in this session. We've been on for about an hour. Why don't we add our breakpoint now of 1200 pixels? We're at 1200. We're going to add our tablet size, and let's just see how it does. Ooh, it does pretty good so far. Why don't we add our mobile, right? Ooh, couple of fixes, couple of changes that need to be made, okay? So number one, I think we're going to have to do some responsive typography. Number two, we have some images. Like, these are absolutely positioned. And when you absolutely position images, they don't have that ebb and flow. We're going to need to have that responsive breakpoint, right? When it hits, let's change the way that it's kind of there. Let's change what it's doing and make sure that we're honoring the actual layout. And then lastly, we have some issues here with our cards. They cease to be really usable on the tablet, definitely down here on the mobile. So let's handle these 3 quality assurance issues. We're kind of QAing our website, and we're making our responsive versions work well right now. Let's start at the very top. One of the biggest problems we have is our typography is insane. That's way too big. I love this. This is like, it blew my mind when I found out about this in Framer. It's so easy to fix. I have an established typographic style, right? I'm going to roll down here to my H1. I can open up that style by hitting edit. Notice that we have access to all of the editing features here for our H1, but check this out. We also have this ability to add breakpoints. Right now it's using the same style, same size, same weight, same spacing, same letter spacing, everything on all device sizes. But it recognizes that we have 3 device sizes, because when we hit breakpoints, watch my text right here for tablet and mobile. Breakpoints, boom, added. Done. Walk away. That's it. It took my H1 and it logically said, here we go, check it out. The size of my H1 in desktop is 64. Well, let's just do a typographic scale. Let's make it 51 on tablet, 41 on the mobile. Now you can come back in and tweak these a little bit. So you can see I'm here on my tablet version. I like it. Why don't we just change the line height and just tighten it up a little bit? And then why don't we jump down here? This is definitely needs to get tightened up quite a bit there as well. And that's it. We completely fixed our typographic issues. Let's do the same thing here with our H2. Add the breakpoints. Looks really good. I would say the only thing that maybe is a problem is a little bit of that line height. So let's open it up. We're on the medium there. Let's just bring the line height down a little bit. Can't tell because it's not 2 lines, but oh, I messed up. Let's open it up one more time. The good thing about this is I just jump over from large, medium, small like that. Let's change that line height quite a bit, make it look a little bit better. And obviously you could be looking at your design to do this. I'm just eyeballing it for the sake of time. We have solved our responsive typography issues for our H1s and our H2s. Looks really good. Next, let's solve another really easy one, which is let's solve the card issue. We've already done this actually. All we need to do is create a tablet and a mobile version, right? So let's double click on it, right? We have our element here and we have our variant. So on each of these, notice this, I'm actually going to rearrange these a little bit. I'm going to put variant 1 and 2 like this because each of them can have their own variant. So let's create a variant here, and this is going to be our tablet or our mobile. So let's just call this, listen, we have variant 1, and so we'll call this, let's actually rename this to left to right, and we'll go dash desktop. You're going to have to come up with a little bit of a naming system or convention for yourself. Mine's going to be left to right desktop, and then that means I'm going to name this one down here, I'm going to name it right to left, but it's still the desktop version. Tracking with me? Beautiful. Okay, so now we have right to left and left to right, and now I'm going to take this, I'm going to copy the name, I'm going to rename this variant to be left to right, but I'm going to call this, let's just do 1. I think one style will work for tablet and mobile most likely. I already kind of pictured, what do you think I'm about to do? I think you probably know. I'm just going to grab the entire layout and just go top to bottom. That's literally all I'm going to do. And then I'm going to grab the element inside the 3D element. I'm going to set it to fill like this. And I'm going to set it to fit the content like this. And I'm going to set this one not to be absolute. It really shouldn't be absolute, should it? This 3D element thing. But we could just change it if we want. Let's do relative instead. No, we could do fixed size. We'll just bring it down. Oh, whoa. Little bit of work. Oh, we could turn it too if we wanted to. We don't want to turn it. But let's just put it right in the middle like that. I think that probably works, right? Because look at it's super duper responsive. So I love this so much. It's so easy. Okay, so let's do one more. Let's do the same variant switch and change there. Boom. You're going to do image on top this time. Although when we drop down the mobile, you start reading them probably from top to bottom. It would get confusing. So this is where you can actually be really playful with your designs and say, hey, listen, I know they go from left to right and right to left, but when we get to mobile, everything should just read image second and type lockup first, right? Ooh, heck yeah. So this is where we grab our 3D element box here, and we're going to just paste in and replace, hopefully. Let's see if we can paste like that. Maybe get this here. Does it do what it? No, it doesn't do it. That's fine. Let's just rework it and we'll do the same thing. We'll set it to fill like so, and we'll bring the size of it down, put it in the center. Let's just grab the whole thing and make the height set to fit content. It looks amazing. It's exactly what we needed, okay? So check this out. Now what we get to do is over here on our mobile versions, we just go left to right. Let's go left to right, mobile, beautiful. And we go right to left, mobile, or mobile, and we go left to right, mobile, like that. Beautiful. Let's just make sure that the heights are set on all of these. Actually, let's do it up here at this top level. Let's just make sure it's fitting the content. Notice how it fixed it here as well. Oh, mind-blowing. This is a good lesson for us. If you change something on the desktop size, it will reflect and wash its way down to the other sizes. So if I, change the, if I was to change, for instance, the order of these, like it's going to change the order of them everywhere, right? It's going to be reflected everywhere. If I put the text on the bottom there, it's reflected on all of them. But if I make a change here, it's not on tablet, it's not necessarily reflected in the one down below or in the mobile version, okay? Let's just do this one. Boom. That works really, really good. I love it. Everything's good. Now we could create a tablet version of this, and actually we didn't even need like right to left, left to right mobile. All we actually needed was one component of this, or one variant of this, which was really just mobile, left to right mobile. And that's it, right? So now we just come in here and just make sure they're all using that one variant like that. Boom. And it works, right? Come in and make sure all of these are using the mobile version and it works. We could change and rework the sizing of the element inside if we wanted to, but boom, that's it. It works gorgeously. Let's just take a look at our website. We have one more issue, and that is the responsive nature of our absolutely positioned elements up there. We're just going to make some layout changes, but look at how good it looks. It is responsive. It tucks down to all the sizes. I'm loving it. Let's make these last changes and then we are done for the day. And we might answer some more questions before we get out of here, but let's just jump right into that tablet view and we can address them. Okay, so here we go. Pop in. Let's find our text lock up here. We have our abstract element and our blur. And why don't we just start with our abstract element because it's real big. Hi-yo, watch out. Okay, we're going to resize it. Let's just resize you down, little fella, just like that. And our blur is like super duper intense, so we're going to move that down as well. Good. Let's start there. Let's see how that works. And then let's get over to our phone version, unlock those. We're going to do the same thing. Abstract version is going to go way down. We don't need it to be so intense. And because our layout is condensing, it's kind of shoving everything it's kind of shoving everything around, right? Pushing everything down. So we really just need to move these elements way down, okay? And that's a pretty intense blur, it feels like, at that level. So why don't we bring the opacity of it down a little bit as well? That feels a little bit better. Okay, the next thing we're going to do is this element starts to get really big. Our hero image, it starts to get really small. Oof, what do we do about that? Well, maybe we could increase the size of it to be a little bit bigger. Like something like, right now it's using a fractional unit, 1 FR. Maybe we could do more like percentages and move it to 130%. It's going to make it a little bit bigger. Maybe we can make it kind of fill, right? It's 115% of the parent container, and that parent container has a little bit of that spacing, right? So here we have a little bit of padding issue now also at the bottom. It's pushing, I think, it's pushing our element too far down and too far up. So why don't we also just customize our padding on the mobile to be more like 20 on the top, 20 on the bottom. I think we probably should do the same thing here, but not 20. Let's drop down to maybe 40 and 40. And let's check our tablet desktop drops down to tablet. The padding changes, which is really nice, right? Like padding changes there. Big padding, smaller text everywhere, right? Pretty nice. Our blur is kind of disappearing. Let's go back in really quick. Let's find the blur. Boom, and let's just bump it up, okay? Move it up. There we go. Now we got it. It's jumping. and bumping and moving. Good. We have a little bit of that movement. We can fix that movement next. And then you have your element starting, your element starting to shrink down. I think actually on the mobile view, the phone view, we should actually just change the visibility of that 3D element to non-visible, because it's distracting, I think, at that view. That's my personal take on it. We might even say that same thing here, but one thing we want to do is let's grab this abstract element and the blur, and now we can look at when something is pinned, right? Like, or something is absolutely positioned, we can pin it. You can see the pinning that's happening here, the movement, like on where it is, right? And so we could pin it there. We could start to like do some of this like all around stuff, just like in Figma. I think it's probably okay. I think what we want to do is just hide the image when we get to that view. So why don't we just do that? Let's preview one more time. Looks pretty good. We get the big image, get rid of the big image there, and we maybe just address our hero image one more time on the mobile, and I think we should be good. Let's just address the size of it. It's still a little too big. Let's go 105% instead. Let's press preview. I think it looks pretty good. Boom. That whole thing just disappears. That way we don't get any of that weird movement. I like it. All of that feels pretty good. And our mobile sizes work all the way down. Tablet works good all the way down. We have consistency. We have that nice consistent line. Now, we didn't rework the navigation, but what we have done is press publish, update, and what we do have is a newly updated view of our website that we can actually send to our client. They can see it working functionally right here in the browser, and everything's working pretty good. We custom did all of these layouts for the most part. We did very little copy and paste over from Figma into Framer. Majority of it was happening here so that you can understand these core principles of Framer and build any layout that you want, not just the one that you're finding here, but any layout that you can think of, you can build it inside of Framer. We're going to answer a couple of questions, and then we're going to get out of here for the day. All right, questions. We got a couple of them here. Let's see. Moonmita says, can you please explain the use of viewport height? I can explain that really, really easily for you. Viewport height is simply measuring the height of the website or the browser at its current moment, right? So if I'm using a 32-inch monitor over here, the viewport height starts to look more like 12 or 1300 pixels, but my MacBook Pro over here, it's only about 800 pixels. We can size things based off the viewport height or width. Very interesting. You can do a lot of things in layout with viewport height and viewport width. Maybe we'll play with that in a future one, but it's definitely a lot of fun to experiment with. Okay, let's see. Anybody else have any questions? We're going to check those out. Let's see. We had some questions earlier. Doesn't seem like we have so many right now. Hey, if you watched this entire thing, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for taking a look at this live stream series. Join us. Watch yesterday's if you missed it. Join us tomorrow and on Thursday and on Friday. We're going to complete this entire project. We're going to launch it, and you can grab all the assets and everything and follow along with me. The link for all of that is down in the description. It's free for you to have. Speaking of free, again, if you're interested in free stuff, maybe consider becoming a design champion. It gets you access to all sorts of behind-the-scenes content, live sessions, access to me, a cool community to be a part of. But also we have the ability for you to become a Design Champs Plus member, which just costs a couple bucks a month. It's like the cost of a cup of coffee, basically, a fancy cup of coffee. And you'll get access to a plus community with premium content, premium resources, courses, different things like that that will help improve. Courses like this one and stuff like this that are happening here on YouTube will actually get moved into that premium space. So if you miss it live, you'll actually find it within the plus community later on. So definitely consider that. Also, if you are enjoying learning with me or from me, then quick announcement, my 30-day UI design course is the final week for you to get it at the 50% discount. Currently, this is one of the largest, most robust, and well-rounded UI design programs out there right now. And it has great feedback. We have hundreds of graduates that have gone through it, and it's currently on sale for $3.99. But by the end of the week, it's going to be back up to $7.99. So if you're interested in UI design as well, you want to strengthen all of those skills, definitely check out the 30-day UI design program. It's on sale. Summer's over, summer sales ending. We're going back to full price. So I hope you guys had a fantastic time in this session today. I hope you learned a ton. I hope you'll join me in the following days. Most of all, I hope you're having a rad week. I hope you're learning stuff, growing, crushing it in your design game, and we'll see you in the next one.